Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel here on YouTube is Discerning What is True. This is a live program tonight. I wanted to continue my reading of Redemption 4.5. I wanted to share something that was key in how what took place under the Wilson administration with them actually passing the idea of simply is that the Federal Reserve was created. It enabled them to basically create war. And that continues on. And there's an interesting book by Anthony Sutton, which I have right here. It's called Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, and how what took place here in the United States is key. And what I mean by that is that it enabled to create two enemies. It created the German government with Hitler, and it included the Bolshevik, not Bolshevik, but the other enemy, which is the communists, uh, in Russia. And with that, that money which came from here in America was used to set up two world wars. That's a fact, folks. It's a fact. So by what Wilson and the so-called Congress and House, both houses, that is, enable them to create money out of nothing in order to use that money to create two world wars. Think about that. Okay. So let's look at the writings here of Redemption 4.5. And what this is the section 2. What I've read so far to you is to deal with the first section. And what this is all about is the sectional 2 is informational articles on U.S. government, bankruptcy, Federal Reserve, etc., presenting the new history. So what it is doing with is what I call a quick history lesson for you all to disciple all this and understand how this has been put together in a way that most people would not be able to connect it all and make a puzzle out and then eventually have seen what really actually transpired. So this is called the timeline of history. And in May of 1773, Britain renewed the Townshend Act duties on tea, which was about to expire, and also allowed the British East India Tea Company to sell directly to the American public without any middleman and without any middleman markup, thus angering those in Boston, the merchants, and triggering the Boston Tea Party. Sometime we'll go through this whole thing with the Boston Tea Party because I believe that the Masons were quite active here in America to stir up the pot, so to speak, to get us in a war. It doesn't make any sense for this country to get involved in a war over some taxes here. They were actually not super serious, but instead was used to get us in. So there are these people who work behind the curtains are actually involved in creating habits and to destroy people's lives. So on December 16th of that same year, 1773, the Boston Tea Party took place. And that evening, 30 men, that is 30 men disguised as Mohawk Indians, dumped 342 chests of British tea into the Boston harbor. In 1774, King George III in British Parliament retaliated by passing the Coercive Acts, called by the colonists as the Intolerable Acts. In September 4th, that is the following year, the First Continental Congress assembled in Philadelphia. And in 1775, April 18th was the start of the Revolutionary War. So you can see how these things took place within less than 2 years, a little over 2 years, to eventually lead to war. On May 1st, 1776, the Order of the Illuminati, a secret society of wealthy Intellectuals, founded in Bavaria by Dr. Adam Weishaupt, a professor of canon law at Ingolstadt University. The Illuminati and the Freemasons collaborated for a while, then later split ranks. After the headquarters of the Illuminati were raided by the Bavarian government, the Illuminati operated under the disguise of the League of the Just. From the beginning, the Illuminati's purpose was to overthrow the Pope, all governments, including as all kings of Europe. Then in 1781, the First National Bank of the United States was established. That is the Bank of North America, although it was not called that. It was called the Bank of the First National Bank of the United States, formed by an act of the Continental Congress, who also owned and controlled it instead of it being privately controlled. So remember that as we've talked about the issue in recent times when I spoke tonight, it's owned by private individuals. In 1789, the Constitution of the United States was ratified. In 1791, the Assumption Act of 1790 allowed a newly chartered bank in the United States, or more commonly today called the First Bank of America, to assume private control of the state chartered banks. So gradually, the move was taking place 10 years later when Continental Congress approved it, and then now you're seeing is now private control of state chartered banks. So already it's beginning to move in the wrong direction. 1792 is the Coinage Act of 1790, defined a dollar as a unit of measurement in either gold or silver. Note, in 1965, under President Johnson, certainly after the U.S. bankruptcy, then President Johnson signed the Coinage Act of 1965, which for the first time altered and replaced the Coinage Act of 1792, therein removing any definition of what constitutes a dollar today. See, it was based upon a unit of measurement, either gold or silver. That's when also that your coins here, your quarters, your half dollars, your dollars that were actually in coinage were, even in that time period in the 1960s, was still 40% silver. But in 1966 or 64, I'm trying to remember the years, but don't hold me to that, they ceased to do that. So notes are not dollars, even though it's stated on its face, and as the Federal Reserve Bank has stated, a federal note is just a piece of paper. Also in a 1969 court case, that is Credit River in Minnesota said, this is the famous court case that took place. It's very important for people to understand what happened, because it tells the truth of what really is going on. Those Federal Reserve notes are not lawful money within the contemplation of the Constitution of the United States and are null and void. Further, the notes on their face are not redeemable in gold or silver coin, nor is there a fund set aside anywhere for the redemption of said notes. In the past, in my grandfather's time period, they were redeemable by either gold or silver at the banks. So if you had a $10 bill, it would say it would be a $10, it'd be a $10 silver certificate, or it'd be a $10 gold certificate. President Andrew Jackson in 1832 vetoed renewal of the charter for the Second Bank of the United States. And he was actually attacked 2 times to assassinate him, but they were unsuccessful. In 1871, the federal government formed itself into the D.C. Corporation and adopted itself under the U.S. Constitution. We may go into that whole deal with the District of Columbia because in reality, those who are actually, if I understand the tax codes somewhat, and what I'm looking into is that they are the ones, the District of Columbia are supposed to be the ones that are taxed there. But it's all complicated in a lot of ways, so I won't hold on to that yet. So we'll just continue on. In 1873, there was a financial panic. Again, they're working their way to eventually try to bring the United States down. In 1884, another 11 years later, there was another financial panic. So they're creating these whole things to get people upset. Okay, and then in 1893, there was a financial panic again. And the fourth one was pretty much the one that triggered it all. In 1907, the financial panic provoked by J.P. Morgan to bring about total change in private control of the central banks and the monetary system. So they had actually, ever since the whole idea of the District of Columbia in 1871, there are 4 times they created a financial panic. 4 times. So they're basically trying to create a problem here so that people get upset, and then there's a radical change that takes place. The radical change is actually detrimental towards the people. So in 1910, Basic Plan for the Federal Reserve Act, drafted as a secret meeting held at a private resort of J.P. Morgan on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. The 7 men who attended it represented estimated 1/4 of total wealth of the world at that time. Okay, so you had, first of all, Nelson W. Aldrich, which was the Republican whip in the Senate, chairman of the National Monetary Commission, which he was involved in. He actually went overseas, and he's also the father-in-law to John D. Rockefeller Jr. Now, I want to explain to you, well, we won't go there. We're just going. So Henry P. Davison is the senior partner of J.P. Morgan Company. It's the second man. The third man was Charles D. Norton. He's the president of the First National Bank of New York. Fourth is Piatt, P-I-A-T-T, Andrew, is the assistant secretary of the treasury. The number 5 person there is Frank A. Vandercliff, president of National City Bank of New York, representing William Rockefeller. Number 6, Benjamin Strong, head of J.P. Morgan's Bankers Trust Company, later to become head of the system. And the last person, but also the most important, is Paul M. Warburg, a partner in Kuhn, Loeb and Company, representing the Rothschilds and Warburgs in Europe. So that name is key. He is the one who is considered the mastermind of all the idea of what took place in this time period, because he's the one that creates the whole paperwork in order to do this. So April 8, 1913, a lot of things taking place under Woodrow Wilson here. I just want you to understand this is happening. There's going to be, actually under the Wilson administration, all this was progressive. People think progressive is positive, but progressive back then was simply, it's leaning towards socialism. So the 17th Amendment was ratified, allowing power reserved to the states to be passed into the hands of a new form of federalism. Another very important thing for people to understand, placing the State of the Union in the position of a mere supervised unit of such governments. In other words, states' power, states' rights here is given a blow, a deadly blow here. What used to take place was that the 2 representatives, the 2 senators that represent each state. So all states in the Union had 2 senators, no matter what size they were. Okay, so that equaled 50 states times 2 equaled 100. Not at that time, there wasn't 50 states, but I'm just explaining to you what it is today. So what happened was they chose the House members and the Senate members of the state would choose the senators that would represent the state. So for over 100 years, more than 100 years, 135 years approximately, that they were doing this, and suddenly this is completely changed in perspective, is that there's a loss of power to the states. So this sets the stage for the complete change by the federal government to form a constitutional guarantee reform, Republican form, to a democracy, and set the stage for the hostile corporate takeover of the U.S. monetary system and to place control of it in the private hands. All these things are key. All this took place under Woodrow Wilson. This is why I consider him the worst president of the United States ever. So what he's trying to state here, is that this is a power, the power vacuum used to be the state and the federal government contentious. And part of that is to do with the war between the states, simply, is that one is being a centralized government and the other is a state government. So there's supposed to be what I call a balance here, so to speak. protect. But when this happens, it's completely now, it's the federal government, the centralized control. And the states are now just simply this a little stepchild of the federal government. So December 22nd and 23rd, Federal Reserve Act was created. That is a private corporation, not a federal agency. Central bank signed into law by Woodrow Wilson, to which years later quoted, "I have unwittingly ruined my country." Yeah, he definitely ruined this country, big time, no doubt about it. This was all done in secret. Again, another red flag, because many congressmen left Washington for their Christmas holidays. And they chose to do this while the rest were gone, especially those who actually are opposing this. So with no so key leaderships, some of those leaders were Charles Lindbergh Sr., who opposed it, and a few others, but I can't think of that. That's the main one there. There's a couple other ones also involved. In 1915, May 7th, a ocean liner called the USS Lusitania, with American passengers on board, was sunk by a German U-boat commanded by Captain Walter Schweigler off the coast of Ireland in the English Channel. Just before this tragedy, Lusitania reported carrying over 6 million rounds of ammunition owned by J.P. Morgan Company, stopped its traditional zigzag sailing pattern and cut its speed in half to await escort vessel, the HMS Juno, which was to lead it to port. Unbeknownst to the Lusitania, and for reasons which have never been satisfactorily explained, the First Lord of the Admiralty is, guess who? Winston Churchill. That's right, that little crook. Ordered the Juno to return to port of Queenstown while the Lusitania sat alone and unprotected in the English Channel waiting for his escort. One torpedo was fired, and within 18 minutes, approximately 1,200 passengers, including 128 Americans, perished. It is speculated that Churchill deliberately sacrificed the Lusitania in order to force America entry into the war. Correct. He's correct. This was done. Don't ever think that Winston Churchill is a great guy. Don't ever think that, because he never was, folks. Never was. He did some dastardly things. Dastardly things. Very spoiled brat in a lot of ways. He was an alcoholic. He was also someone who couldn't basically handle his finances at all. So April 16th, 1917, so how many days is this away? This is actually May. So it actually took a year or two more later for the United States to officially declare war on the Axis powers. And in 1919, June 28, League of Nations signed without United States participation until more than 20 years later, when this was repackaged as the United Nations. So in 1919, they pushed this whole thing with, again, Woodrow Wilson was part of this. He went to Europe. He was considered a hero in some ways at that point. He was getting other countries to work together. And then unbeknownst to him, not realizing that his own country, the United States, said no. They're not going to do this. We're not going to be a part of this. That he took that pretty hard, but reality simply is he kind of deserved it. 1920. So they've already so supposedly satisfied this whole issue of solving the financial panic, and yet in 1920, the financial panic engineered by the Fed proved it could manipulate economics of nations at will without war. 1921, the Shepard-Towner Maternity Act, known as the Maternity Act, created the birth registration, or what we now know as the birth certificate. So you see the pieces are being put together here little by little, and actually at a quicker pace, it seems to be. So with that taking place, when you went to the hospital, now you got a birth certificate as of 1921. So my parents, unbeknownst to them, and I don't recall. Maybe I'm wrong. I should have asked my parents, but they're both gone now, deceased. I should have asked them, were they born in a hospital or not? So July 29, 1921, the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, was formed here in the United States. And refusal to join the League of Nations following World War I, an outgrowth of a secret British society formed by Cecil Rhodes and backed by Rockefeller and Carnegie Foundation money. The CFR agenda envisioned nothing less than world domination and the establishment of a modern, feudalist society controlled by themselves through the world's central banks. This is all a threat to us, people, the common people. This is the real problem here. This is their ideas. They see themselves as superior to us. They've completely brainwashed us in every way they can. In 1930, Bretton Woods Agreement, in which 16 nations declared bankruptcy. The German Convention Treaty declared that international bankruptcy treaties were superior to all federal law and even the United States Constitution. I bet you didn't know that. I didn't. In March 9, 1933, the United States Corporation, people are not unaware of this, there are actually two United States, folks. Okay? And that's what most people are unaware of. There's a reason why you hear different talk when you hear congressmen talking. They're like, what are you talking about? You know, we're no longer a corporation. Then you have other ones talking about it. So anyway, the United States Corporation went bankruptcy and was declared so by President Roosevelt. By Executive Order 6073, 6102, 6111, and 6260. And see Senate Report 93-549, pages 187 and 594. The bankruptcy was codified as 12 U.S.C.A. 95A. Gold was illegally ordered to be turned in. Okay. So here's the year. By 1965, silver was removed after John F. Kennedy was assassinated by the federal government and the international bankers. Today, constitutional money exchange does not circulate. Your energy, faith, and spirit was and is pledged to the state due to existing national emergency. So this emergency is still ongoing. It has never been canceled. Okay? This is why you have every president that come into the office gives a executive order with this deal with the national emergency. It is still going on. So silver was moved at 65. So basically, I think that's the end of silver being in the coins. Also, in 1933, most likely you were not a gleam in your daddy's eye, but your daddy was made a debtor. His property was pledged to the state. His titles changed to certificate of title or deeds. And he was soon departed of the constitutional money to pay his debts at law. Continued, 1938. I didn't know this. This is really wild. Federal United States, that is the government, joined the International Criminal Police Commission, or Interpol, designating the U.S. Attorney General as the official representative to the organization. You know, I don't even know this. This is something new. The Secretary of the Treasury is designated by the U.S. Attorney General as the representative to Interpol in 1958. Representative to Interpol must pursuant Article 30 to the Constitution and General Regulation of Interpol, 22 U.S.C. Section 263, renounce their allegiance to their respective countries and expatriate. The World Bank is the agent for the creditors/principals of the federal United States and is not subject to American law. July 1944, Bretton Woods Monetary Conference that takes place at Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, which through the guidance of Henry Dexter White, Assistant Secretary to U.S. Treasury, later known as a member of the Communist Espionage Ring, and John Maynard Keyes, a well-known Fabian socialist from England, created the IMF, International Monetary Fund / World Bank, whose main role was the elimination of the gold exchange standard at the basis of currency valuation and the establishment of world socialism. White became the first executive director for the United States at the IMF. Over 100 more nations declared bankruptcy. So when this all took place, there were only a few countries that actually said they were bankrupt, but over 100 more took place. 1946, the Administration Procedure Act takes place. In 1973, the Trilateral Commission created by David Rockefeller to coordinate North America, that is the United States, Mexico, and Canada, and also Japan and Western Europe, into a new world order under slogans such as free trade, environmental protection under a full-blown regional government emerges from the process. And that part of that full-blown regional government was to do with NAFTA, the so-called trade treaty within the European Union, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is NAFTA, the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation Agreement, APEC, and the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT, had little to do with free trade. It benefits the powerful. That's what it benefits. All this is created to benefit the powerful, to eliminate competition. In 1980, the UNIDO Treaty number 9719 was ratified by the Senate, which makes the U.S. Constitution subservient to the UN World Constitution. Did you hear me? Did you hear me on this? Because what's happened here, your senators are traitors. Traitors. They ratified by the Senate, which makes the U.S. Constitution subservient to the UN World Constitution. And then we have something radical that takes place in the 1990s. In 1992, the Ruby Ridge that took place in Idaho, federal government surrounded a family cabin home of Randy Weaver, his wife Vicki, and 3 children in the hills of northern Idaho. The feds, under a ruse of a federal violation via setup, shot and killed Randy's son, Sammy, and later shot his wife, Vicki, in the head. Continue. 1993, Waco. David Koresh, head of the Davidians, were surrounded by the federal military on the ruse of failing to pay a tax on a .50 caliber machine gun. You just can't make this shit up, folks. After first being attacked by the Fed by the alcohol, tobacco, and firearm agents shooting into the church home complex after days of standoff, with a helicopter also firing into the church home complex with women and children inside. Military tanks attacked the building and pumped in gallons of gas, or even probably chemicals, of which a fire then started, and due to winds, the structure was engulfed in flames and was burned to the ground. The women and children went into an underground structure and were found dead. Government agents were able to get inside before the fire and shot some of the Davidians in the head. Continue. 1995, the Oklahoma City Alfred P. Murray Federal Building bombing. On the morning of April 1995, supposedly Timothy McVeigh, an ex-Army explosive expert, parked a rental rider truck with explosions in front of the complex at 9:02 a.m. If someone understands the astrology part of this, would be key. It was done on April 19, 1995, and it's at 9:02 precisely. They do all this astrologically, folks. They do this. A massive explosion occurred which sheared the entire north side of the building, killing 168 people. However, based upon additional evidence, the concrete columns just inside the building were set with small, high explosives. So no fertilizer truck did this. It couldn't have done this type of damage. He was the scapegoat. 1 year later, a business across the street had discovered a tape recording of a business meeting that morning in 1995. On the tape was heard boom, 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 and then a humongous boom. So you're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 small booms, and then a large one, 7. For all the other evidence is seen, established research, etc., McVeigh most likely was a patsy, or paid to do the deed. But you decide. And on 2011, September 11th, 9/11, New York trade towers supposedly collapsed as a result of a single airplane crash into each of its 2 towers, which is ridiculous. It's bullshit. Non-government reports stated that at 9 a.m., the 8 bank computer programs within the towers was set to download to a central computer as the country was going to shift from a debt-based money system to a asset-based money system. Do you hear that? You hear that? The 8 bank computer programs within the towers were set to download to a central computer as the country was going to shift from a debt-based money system to a asset-based money system. That'd be interesting to research that. Over 2,000 people were killed due to the collapse just prior to the thousands working the towers. As reported, the Jews were told not to show up for work that day. As reported, the owner of the towers had just increased the insurance on the towers just months before, and evidence shows that the towers collapsed not due to the airplane crashing into them, but from well-placed explosives for a controlled demolition. It was a demolition, folks. Let's watch and look at it. Presumption is that since the Fed/FBI was involved in the previous trade tower explosion a few years earlier, that when all the facts are looked at, it wasn't done by foreign terrorists, but you have to decide that. The remaining historical events of our time, the Afghan War, the war in Iraq, the Patriot Act 1 and 2, and so many things else since then that you have lived through, experienced, and witnessed. The question is, were you awake? Were you? Well, I can remember when it happened. I had roommates. I didn't agree with them. I knew that a plane couldn't take those buildings down. I knew that for sure. I didn't know much else. I also knew that basically that, you know, when the building number 7 just basically collapsed on itself, so it was basically demolition. In fact, the gentleman who actually took over the building, he said they pulled it. It was just a slang word to tell them that they set charges to it and destroyed it, brought it down. The agency represents the very United. So here we go. So I'm changing that's the part of that complete there. What I wanted to do, continue on. Let's see how many minutes I've got here on this particular video. Okay, about 32 minutes. So we'll continue on, or do we want to continue? Let's see. We'll read a little bit more here. How about that? So this is the next part, what I call a brief history of the United States. The agency represented the various United Colonies of North America via the Declaration of Independence declared a separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature creditor entitled them, formally expatriating themselves from England or Great Britain and repatriating themselves in an orderly fashion to a social compact style as the United States of America under the legislative assembly known as the United States and Congress assembled. However, most people do not realize the primary reason for the expedition and ensuing war was not taxation without representative, but the forced payment of taxes to the king in gold, not paper money. The people in the colonies of North America were flourishing by using their own fiat money system based only on their production, not a gold-based system that could be manipulated by the king. The king could not control the fiat money system and therefore passed a law requiring the subjects of the crown to pay taxes in gold only. The king had most of the gold. Of course he did, just like almost other kings of Europe also did. Just read the stories of what Mr. Columbus did in the islands in the Caribbean. They were only interested in gold, was all they were interested in. They didn't care anything about the people there. In fact, they made them slaves. Everything they've taught you, folks, is a lie. The people of the colonies had little scarcity/value. Unemployment ensued, and embittered souls cried out for redress. This fell on deaf ears, which led to the national powers of the people, which all political powers inherited. They declared their separation, causing the crown to declare an unjust war on the exercise of principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as the people of the colonies of North America had so aptly declared and laid before a candid world the causes which impelled them to their separation. The representatives of the United States in Congress Assembly did win the Revolutionary War with England. I don't know for sure about that, folks. There was a malfunction, however, in the plans for the United States of America. Money powers were waiting at the gate from the very beginning. Yeah, definitely for that. I would agree with that. Although the British Empire, as a recognized government in the world, lost the American Revolution, the financial struggle behind it did not lose the war. Most visible of the power structure identity was the East India Company, owned by the bankers and crown in London. This was an entirely private enterprise whose flag was adopted by Queen Elizabeth in 1600. This flag has 13 red and white horizontal stripes with a blue rectangle in the upper left-hand corner. Interesting. Isn't that interesting? The flag had 13 red and white horizontal stripes with a blue rectangle in its upper left-hand corner. So the only thing that changed there was the stars representing the states at that time. Although there are those who have found another flag that actually is not horizontal, but were actually vertical. Might want to look into that. The British government became hostile by oppressive legislation and eventually declared war from 1774 to 1782. The East India Company owners constituted a portion of the invisible sovereign power structure that is the banks behind the British government. They kept control of the holdings in the New World and moved right into the new economy created by the New Order through the social compact known as the United States of America. Together, and its close association with the colonial representatives of the United States in Congress, assembled and their most powerful landowners still maintain control of the New World for the British Crown. The U.S. Constitution created a new social contract structure of government that was established on a much higher plane than the parliamentary system of the Confederation of the United States of America. It was a social compact known as Constitutional Republic, wherein a certain amount of power was delegated to the states, that is, corporations, enfranchised by the new order of the social compact. A certain amount was dedicated to the agency federal government with the residue power reserved to the signatory parties respectively. The real party in interest, though, is we the people of the United States, who either signed the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the new Constitution of the United States of America, or were related as member posterity of such people having been signature thereto. To no other people did such social compact guarantee any standings of right or otherwise under the new social compact. The representatives of we, the people in the United States, by the way of their agencies, representatives of the United States in Congress assembled, had certain innumerable powers delegated by the social compact known as the Constitution of the United States. So far as the several state parties to the U.S. Constitution are directly concerned, the representatives of the United States in Congress assembled may not exercise any power not so delegated by the social compact known as the U.S. Constitution. All power not delegated to the representatives of the United States in Congress assembled by the social contract is reserved to the several states within their respective territory borders, or to signatory people thereto, or the posterity thereof, the Articles of Amendments, number 9 and 10 of the U.S. Constitution. The Constitution was pushed and supported by the bankers. Who else? Through their associates for their own control over the construct known as the United States of America. And by the way, all those letters are capitalized, except of, by the new social compact. Had the Articles of Confederation been completely adopted or reaffirmed instead of adopting a constitution, which came about due to the Treaty of Paris with the Crown of England in 1782 to 83, the bankers would have far less control than they achieved. That's correct. In fact, they never actually declared the Articles of Confederation null or void. Never did. Think about that. Also, I have a book that basically describes basically what took place in Philadelphia. They basically in summer basically had a guard at the door. So this was done in secret. The other thing simply was that the doors were closed, and I'm sorry, not the doors, but they were locked, and the windows were closed. In summer, they didn't want anybody to know they were there. So 10 square miles. Define the word Columbia. The word and the following words to be defined in this section are from Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, the 10th edition. Columbia, New Latin, Christopher Columbus, originated in 1775 in the United States, capital letters. Columbus has the same root word as Columbarian and Columbine. Columbine, I'm sorry. So I'll spell this to you. Columbarium, barium, dove code from Columbia dove, a structure of vaults lined with recesses for Salernian urns, URNS. Dove code, a small compartment raised house or box for domestic pigeons or doves, also for breeding. A settled or harmonious group or organization. Columbine, ME, from ML, columbining and combines, like a dove from a Columbia dove, GK, Colobius, a small diving bird, black. I'm not going to go all of this simply. It's come up in Latin, and I can't read Latin, sorry, or pronounce it, I should say. So, the Colombian faction, an Italian organization, a Masonic group, also funded by Christopher Colon, C-O-L-I-N, who was renamed by the organization as Christopher Columbus. That's not his real name. Circa 1480, the Colombian faction's symbol is a black dove. Interesting. It's all interesting to note that the Illuminati, an Italian Masonic group, was formed in 1776 in America. Both of these groups strictly adhere to their own hereditary bloodlines and purposely do not intermix with other ancestors. The United States consists only of what remains of the 10-mile square granted by the Constitution and ceded by particular states, creating the city of Washington, District of Columbia, and further such acquisitions of the territories of Guam, American Samoa, Mariana Islands, and Puerto Rico. I don't know if people realize this. A couple weeks ago, I think I heard that that they were considering making Puerto Rico the 51st state. I haven't heard anything since then, but that's what I've heard. One of the powers granted in the Federal Social Compact in the United States and Congress is similar in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 16 and 7, which reads as follows. 16 says, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district, not exceeding 10 miles square, as may my secession of particular states and acceptance of Congress because the seat of government of the United States and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and the needful buildings. And also to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all the new powers vested by the Constitution of the government of the United States or any other department or officer thereof. So said Congress has absolute or what is described as plenary, P-L-E-N-A-R-Y, power. This is municipal, police power, and the like. Where does this Congress have such plenary power? Read again clause 16 and 17 above. Only within a geographic area of the District of Columbia, and all forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings within the several states. Okay? So, let's continue. The United States is an abstraction. It exists only on paper. It is a total fiction. It exists as an idea. The various republic states of the Union exist in substance and reality. The United States only takes on a physical reality after Congress possibly activates constitutionally delegated powers through statutes enacted in accordance with Article 1, Section 7 of the Social Compact, known as the U.S. Constitution. It is necessary for you to read that section. Okay? What he's saying simply is that we've been befuddled and fooled. It's a total fiction. It is idea. And it only exists in a certain context of the land that is set aside between Maryland and Virginia. The Constitution is bifurcated, separated in two parts. The Constitution was bifurcated. Bifurcated is defined as separate rated. We will call it bifurcated because it is the separation from the original jurisdiction as outlined in Articles of Confederation. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 16 and 17 clearly sets this out. It is important to remember, as we will be returning to this particular section later on throughout this discourse, the U.S. Congress does have the right to make all laws regarding Washington, D.C. within the 10-mile square granted, whether equal in geographic size as granted or not, and such other territories owned by the United States, etc. This tiny scope of legislative power is the only authority as it relates to the United States and Congress assembled when contemplating any people of the various states or standing otherwise, not signature to such social compact otherwise than by either being directly or indirectly related as a member of the posterity to the actual people signature thereto. So what I'm trying to share, and I've heard this time before, is basically the power is not actually with us, but we've been fooled again. But what he is saying is simply is that only area that they're making laws and such is only within that 10-mile section, that square. We'll have to do more research on that. The First National Bank in the United States. This is defined bank in Black's Law number 4. Please read the entire definition, which consists of one full column. This has reference to law and judges, and in particular to water, maritime. Before you arrive at what you think a bank might be, read it carefully because this will become more and more important later in this course. One of the first acts that the so-called president, Mr. George Washington, did within 2 years of his appointment was to declare an emergency again. That emergency always seems to come up, doesn't it, guys? Someone wants to do something. William Morris, with the help of Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of Treasury, heavily promoted the First National Bank, that is the Bank of England, to legislation in order to create a private bank. In 1781, Congress chartered the First National Bank for a term of 20 years with the same European bankers that were holding the debts before the war. The bankers loaned worthless, unbacked, non-secured, printed money to each other to charter this first bank. Did you hear that? The bankers loaned worthless, unbacked, non-secured, printed money to each other to charter this first bank. After thousands of lives were lost fighting a war to get control of the wealth of the people and their medium of money, why did Congress contract with the same bankers that started the Revolutionary War in the first place? Good question. According to what he says here, they make it very simple. Since the Crown and members of the Rothschild family, as they were commonly known, were the secure party creditors. That's what you're supposed to be, folks. They demanded a private bank to hold the securities, the assets of the United States as the pledge assets to the Crown of England in order to secure the debt to which the United States had defaulted. The holders, that is the physical agents of the Crown of the securities, were the private bankers operating the newly chartered bank. So under public international law, the creditor nation forced the United States to establish a private bank to hold the securities as their collateral for the loan. As throughout history, money leaves wherever we let it go unrestrained. European bankers expand. In 1785, it had been rumored that the youngest Rothschild, Nathan, expanded his wealth to 20,000 pounds within a 15-year period by using other people's money and increased it by 2,500%. In 1787, Amschel de Meyer Rothschild made the famous statement, "Let me issue and control the nation's money, and I care not who writes the laws." It has been alleged that Thomas Jefferson stated if the American people ever allow the previous banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, then the banks and the corporations which grew up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. And that's what's happening right now. Because they're incurring what I call inflation, what's taking place, which is nothing but theft. And then by deflating it, one way or the other, they just do it back and forth. 1798, the 5 Rothschild brothers expanded by opening banks in each of the major cities of Europe. In Germany, Vienna, in Paris, in London, and in Naples. That's the book I shared with you a little earlier, The Secrets of the Federal Reserve, with the eagle here on there with 5 arrows. And he intended to use those 5 arrows, which they were his sons, to take over Europe. The War of 1812 and the Second National Bank. The charter for the private bank was for 20 years and until around 1811. What happened in 1812? The War of 1812 took place. Why did England attack? Washington, D.C. within the 10-mile square. You hear me? They didn't attack anywhere else at this point. Here, the British burned the White House, the Library of Congress, and other buildings. Why would they do that? Unless they're looking for something. Was the attack by England within the assumed 10-mile square an act of war? No, it was not. Under public international law, what was an act of war was the United States not extending the First National Bank into the Second National Bank to continue to maintain the securities on the unpaid debt. So when the United States acted in dishonor, which is true, by not giving the lawful creditor his securities in a peaceful manner, the only remedy available under international public order recourse to the creditor was to come in on letters of marque and seize the assets to protect his loan. Did the Second National Bank get approved? Of course it did. After England attacked the nation that was in default, they saw the light and enacted the Second National Bank. This was for another 20 years, which was to expire around 1836. Continue. The Forgotten 13th Amendment. That's right. I've done a video on this. Attorney, with obligation to the courts and to the public, not to the client. Did you hear that? And whenever the duties of his client conflict with those he owes as an officer of the court in the administration of justice, the former must yield to the latter. Corpus Juris Civium, 1980, Volume 7, heading Attorney-Client, Section 2, 3, and 4. See note. All attorneys owe their allegiance first to the Crown of England, second to the courts, third to the public, and finally to the clients as wards of court. Is any wonder your attorney never wins a case for you, folks? Continue. BAR, an acronym for British Accreditation Regency. Look up each of these words. Attorneys are members of the bar. The ABA, the American Bar Association, is a branch of the Bar Council. Sole bar association in England. All laws today in America are copyright property of British company. All state codes are private, commercial, British-owned law. All attorneys follow instruction from England. A turn means to twist and turn over their clients to the private law of the bank's bankruptcy. That is their job. That is their pledge to those whom they owe their allegiance. Note, by definition, the obligations and duties of attorneys extend to the court and the public government before any mere client. Clients are wards of the court and therefore persons of unsound mind. See also CLIEN, meaning wards of court. Let's continue. The original 13th Amendment. There was also another important issue involving the War of 1812, The original 13th Amendment prohibited attorneys and anyone with a title of nobility to hold any public office in America. All the states had ratified the 13th Amendment except for Virginia. You note that the War of 18 was waged mostly in Washington, D.C. The British burned all the repository buildings, attempting to destroy all records of the new symbols of the social compact known as the United States of America, represented in Washington, D.C. by the United States in Congress assembled. Thus, the War of 1820 was partially waged to prevent the passage and enforcement of the new 13th Amendment. Most book repositories throughout the states were burned to the ground and all records destroyed. There's a famous painting in Washington, D.C. depicting the British boarding a ship after they surrendered. The painting shows the British carrying their rifles as they mounted the gangplank. One may ask, what army is allowed to keep their weapons after they surrender? One must also ask, who really won that war? As a result of the accumulated debt of waging that war, a new bank charter was issued for another 20 years. I think we're going to quit now. We'll deal with this another time. I am pretty much time to stop. 9:30, that is, here on the coast. That is the eastern coast. We'll start with Andrew Jackson in the bank. Next time we'll talk about this. So it's kind of interesting. So I hope you hear what I'm sharing with you. It is vital for you to know the truth. Very vital for you to know the truth here. So it's approximately an hour here, and I'm going to say, basically say goodnight, and we're going to wish you guys a good day, good evening, and take care. It's your choice, folks. I give you the truth. I am giving you the truth. Absolutely. I'm telling you the truth right now. And it's up to you to basically, wake up. That's your choice. So wish you a good evening. You take care. Thank you for listening.